So again, my name is Rick Cole. I'm the city manager, and we tonight is the fun part of urban planning. Um, you know, I years ago listened to a guy talk about what makes communities successful. A guy named Carl Guardino from the Silicon Valley, and because of the success of the Silicon Valley, he is invited to go many places around the country and what he saw is a common dimension of success in communities. He really boiled down to a formula. And I think we all know the 80-20 rule, right? He said, it turns out that in the vast majority of communities, most people agree on about 80% of the issues. Up here in the Silicon Valley, those issues are affordable housing, transportation, and good schools. We agree that those are the cornerstones of our success. Those are also our most difficult problems. Then we disagree about this or that freeway or this or that tax, or they're profound, bitter, divisive debates about some things. But he said the difference between successful communities and unsuccessful communities is successful communities spend about 80% of their time actually accomplishing what they agree on. And only about 20% of their energy goes to fighting about the things they don't agree on. Because it's a democracy and that's healthy. There's going to be disagreements, and we do need the voice of criticism and the voice of challenge. Unsuccessful communities spend 80% of their time fighting about the 20% of the stuff that they disagree upon. Because that means that all the stuff that they agree on doesn't get done. Because nobody's paying attention to that. What they're paying attention to is the things they disagree on. And success comes not from getting stuff done, but from stopping the other guy. And those communities don't thrive over time. Santa Monica is a thriving community. And one of the things that makes it thriving is the level of citizen engagement and the intensity of civic involvement. We have lots of diverse voices, and people are passionate about this community. And that's an asset to our community. But I said tonight's the fun part because we're going to be talking about the 80% that we agree on. We agree that this is the historic heart of our community, the downtown. We agree that there are some things about downtown that we cherish and love and want to preserve. We agree that downtown should be a great place for residents to spend time and to enjoy it, that it's your downtown, first and foremost, and that frankly visitors will come to a downtown that people care about, that the most important dimension of success is, do the people who live here love and take care of and enjoy their own downtown? And so what we're going to talk about tonight is, what are the dimensions, what's the fine grain, what's the placemaking that goes into a downtown that you love, that you care about, that you want to visit often, that you want to take your friends and your family and visitors to? How do we do that? And we've invited someone from another city, not because all the answers are somewhere else, but because we're a sophisticated and open-minded city, and we welcome hearing new ideas and new perspectives. But we also have done a lot of things right here. We can learn first and foremost from our own experiences. 100 years ago, downtowns were the be-all and end-all. That's where you went to the doctor. That's where the newspaper was. That was where you went to the courthouse. There was a public square that you would see your friends in. In downtowns all across America, including here in Santa Monica, downtown was the place to be. And then as the car came into American life, we began to move some things out of downtown. The hospital moved somewhere else to a bigger campus. The newspaper maybe moved away to a cheaper place where they could put their printing plant. And the stores went to the big urban or suburban mall. And more things moved out of downtown. And downtowns all over America began to decline. And guess what? That happened here in Santa Monica as well. And so downtowns reacted and said, oh, we've got to do something. We've got to do some surgery to save the patient. And they did things like building suburban malls in downtown. We did that here too. They decided maybe if we got rid of the cars on a street like they have the suburban malls, then we would have a great thing. And we did that here too. And maybe we should build some big high-rises or level old buildings and put in parking lots. And we did all that here too. And it didn't work in very many places. And it didn't work all that well here. And so beginning in the 80s, this town began to reclaim its downtown, began to reinvest in its downtown. And the 3rd Street Promenade is one of the great successes of the United States of America in beginning to return downtowns to being a cherished place. And we have such wonderful, iconic places here in our downtown. Palisades Park, what an amazing, iconic environment. The 3rd Street Promenade. The Pier, which is an extension of downtown. And we've tried to build on them. In addition to 3rd Street Promenade, we have the new Colorado Esplanade, which we hope over time as we grow into it and as we burnish it and enliven it, that it will too become a cherished part of our downtown. So tonight we're going to talk about what are the big things and the small things that will enliven, enhance, will keep the momentum going forward, that will make a great downtown sustainable as a great downtown. And frankly, how do we begin to recapture some of the resident pride in our downtown? Too often I've heard from residents who say, I don't go there enough. I don't like going downtown. There's too many people. There's too much traffic. We're missing something if people don't feel that it's your downtown. So tonight is about the small moves. This is not about quantity tonight. There will be opportunities for us to talk about those hard issues as a community. But tonight we're going to talk about things we agree on. We might not necessarily agree on every element or every detail, but we all agree that downtown needs to be alive. It needs to be a cultural center. We need to respect our history. We want young people to love it. We want older people to feel welcome there. We want people to be able to get around. We want people to be able to walk. We want people to be able to bike. We want people to be able to park. We want people to enjoy their downtown, to love their downtown, and to make their downtown their own. That's what tonight is all about. So, Jing, let me turn it over to our planning manager, who, along with a really wonderful team of city staff, have been working on this downtown community plan, which is in draft form, and which this is a backdrop of conversation to inform that. So as the council next January opens up the public hearing for us to finalize that downtown plan, we'll have an active community discussion and debate about all the aspects of what goes into a great downtown. This is really the first chapter of that, and so let me introduce Jing.
Thank you very much, Rick. So I want to welcome all of you tonight and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here this evening. Before we launch into the program, just a few housekeeping items. Most importantly, bathrooms are that way. And if you have not signed in yet, please do so at the front desk. If you signed in on Eventbrite, your name tag will be there, but we also have a sign-in sheet if you didn't do it on Eventbrite. We have comment cards up at the front table as well. Everyone should get one. It's the agenda and the card. The way it works is you can either drop it off tonight in our comment card box, or you can fold it over, put a stamp on it, and mail it to us. It's very easy. And also go to the website. We also accept comments that way. There's also parking validations if you drove here tonight at the table, so make sure you grab that before you leave. The program tonight will involve John Bela from Gehl Architects, who will be giving a presentation. We'll follow that with about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A, and then there'll be a presentation on the downtown community plan by Peter James before we break into the open house stations around the room. So with that, I'd like to please join me in welcoming John Bela.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Is there someone who could help me switch over to my... Okay, cool. Thank you, Peter. Great. Thank you, Jing. Thank you, City Manager, for that excellent introduction. What a great characterization of the kind of history and legacy of our American cities and of downtowns. My name is John Bela. I'm an urbanist and a public space designer, and I've been working for the last 10 years or so to rethink the way that we plan and design public space. My work started with a very simple guerrilla art project called Parking Day 10 years ago, and that's led to some of the first parklets in San Francisco, these tiny little public space that's now, I think Santa Monica is actually doing a parklet program here. And continuing to push, innovate in public space design with projects like the Park Cycle Swarm, pedal-powered public open space. Or user-generated urbanism projects like the Bubbleware project for the Sydney Laneways project in Australia. Or even rethinking major civic spaces like the San Francisco Civic Center Victory Garden in San Francisco. We grew 1,000 pounds of food and gave it away to homeless people in San Francisco. Thank you. What I want to talk about tonight is the relationship between public space, which I think we all know and care about, and public life. Because when we're talking about great cities and great neighborhoods, great public spaces, we're really talking about the invitations for people and for public life. One of the world's foremost experts on public life is the Danish urbanist Gehl. Who's heard of Gehl? Has anyone heard of? Oh my goodness, yeah, okay. Jan is well known in this room, that's great. Jan started studying public life 50 years ago. He was trained as a modernist architect. His wife was a sociologist, and she said, Jan, you're doing great buildings, but are you really thinking about and involving people, social life in the buildings you're designing? And Jan said, well, you're right. I need to start understanding how and how people occupy cities and public space. Jan formed a consulting practice called Gehl Architects. I joined Gehl in 2013, and we've been working to bring human-scale design to cities all across the world, working in San Francisco, all over the States, Latin America. But if we agree that human scale is important, well, what is it? What is it when we talk about human-scale design? Human-scale design is design that engages all of our senses, from seeing, hearing, smelling, touching and tasting. When's the last time that you tasted a great piece of architecture in the city? As human animals, our brains require a lot of stimulation. You know, searching for food in the forest, right? We still have those same kind of neurochemistry in our bodies. 1,000 stimuli an hour, that's about once every 4 seconds. A very well-designed active facade, smaller parcels, has that kind of stimulation, right? The historic design of our cities and towns, smaller parcel sizes resulted in this kind of fenestration and activation about once every 4 seconds. Good public space design incorporates ideas about social distance. Do you want to be at intimate distance in public space? Maybe not. But personal distance between 18 inches to 4 feet. Or social distance for people watching is 4 to 12 feet. Or being in a public space where you can actually do people watching 12 feet or more. Good public space design, human scale design, really is built around, engineered around the social life of our brain's neurochemistry. Human scale is about 3 miles an hour, right? Good public space design accommodates walking speed, which is 3 to 5 miles an hour, not vehicular speed, which is 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. And public spaces all over the world, good public spaces incorporate all of those human scale design characteristics. Well, if we agree that human scale design is important for cities, and in order to understand human scale design, we need to understand public life. Well, how do we study, how do we understand public life? At Gehl, we have something called the Public Space Public Life Survey, where we train people to go out and actually count people. We count the number of people walking, we count the number of people cycling, and we look at their age and gender, because that's a really important indicator in terms of safety or invitations in public space. Then we look at what we call stationary activity or lingering activity. What are people doing when they're spending time in a public space? Are they standing waiting for transit? Are they lying down? Are they engaged in some kind of physical activity? Are they buying something? Are their kids playing? We look at all these kind of stationary activities in public space and also record the age and gender of who's doing those activities. And then we compare that public life data with a public space quality data. We've got these 12 quality criteria. Here's an example from Pittsburgh, where we've got about 800 people an hour walking by these two spaces. One of these spaces is doing a much better job of creating invitations for people to stay than the other, and that's because it's hitting all these 12 quality criteria: protection, comfort, and enjoyment. The other thing we study is socioeconomic diversity in public space, because as we know, our cities are divided and socially and racially, and that intuitively we know that public space is where we come together. Public space is critical for civility, for our democracy, and how well do we know how do we know how well our Santa Monica's public spaces are performing relative to their socioeconomic diversity? Well, good. So we get this public life data, we get the public space data, the socioeconomic diversity data. Why is it important? Why do we care? Well, I want to share a few bits of recent research. Physical inactivity in the United States results in about 5 million deaths a year. And that human scale design matters. Good public space design matters. Good human scale design cities are characterized by residential density, a lot of intersections, small blocks, walkable blocks, access to public transport, and of course the number of parks. All these things together, combined, result in about an hour and a half more of physical activity a week without even going to the gym, right? It's just the design of your neighborhood which invites this kind of physical activity. The second piece of research I want to share is some of the work from Raj Chetty, which has shown that diverse walkable neighborhoods connect people to economic opportunity. So the neighborhoods that we grow up in have a lot to do with our ability to rise up the economic ladder. And neighborhoods that are characterized by good upward mobility have elementary schools with higher test scores, a higher share of two-parent families, greater levels of involvement in civic and religious groups, which I think is quite vibrant here in Santa Monica, a lot of social capital, and also integration of affluent, middle class, and poor families. That's critical, actually, for upward mobility. Great, so we know this stuff is important. Well, how do we translate that data, public life data, into making great cities? It starts with policy and strategy, right? The big picture thinking. Copenhagen, this is Copenhagen in the 50s. Car-choked urban center, just like very many American cities. It was a gradual process of using public life data to inform incremental changes, slowly removing a parking space, gradually adding to the public space network, gradually making more investments in transit. This was a 30-year, 40-year transformation of Copenhagen over time that today makes it one of the world's most livable cities. Well, that's great. That works in Scandinavia, heterogeneous culture, socialism. Does that actually work in the States? Can that work in the US context? Well, we got a chance to try that in New York City when we started to work there in 2007. We were invited to do a public space, public life study in Times Square. And we found that there was no square in Times Square. 90% of the space in Times Square was allocated for moving and storing cars. Only 10% of that space was sidewalks dedicated to people. But the use patterns were reversed. 90% of the people in Times Square were on foot. Only 10% were in cars. Using that data, the Bloomberg administration and Jeanette Sadik-Khan said, well, let's flip the script in Times Square. Let's put the square back in Times Square. And let's not wait 10 years to do it. Let's do it overnight with a tactical move. Let's just shut down the space to cars, put out some simple chairs and umbrellas and see if New Yorkers will take to their new space. Well, of course they did. People were crowded on the sidewalks. They spilled into the new space and embraced it immediately. With follow-up analysis and studies, Times Square is now able to host events like this. A total transformation from a car-choked city center to now one of the world's greatest public spaces. And whether or not you agree with the types of activities there in the city, you can't argue with these numbers, right? A 35% decrease in pedestrian injuries, 60% decrease in traffic injuries, and basically 74% of people say Times Square has improved dramatically. So with some simple thinking and using data-driven design, we're able to transform one of the most major public spaces in the country. Well, so what are the elements of human scale design? How do you kind of translate that data into practice to make great places? Well, there's things like pedestrian crossings, which I know you're doing here. Doesn't have to be the black and white zebra stripe. There's many different ways to integrate creativity into something simple as a pedestrian crossing. Pedestrian lighting is a feature in many cities, and I think it's a great opportunity here in Santa Monica to introduce some very creative thinking about how we introduce ped lighting. Seating and planting is critical, right? And a variety of types of seating. Seating isn't just benches; it's movable seats. It's stairs. It's parklets. It's many other types of invitations for people to spend time. Or what I like to call social furniture, which is movable furniture, which gives people an opportunity to kind of adjust and change the environment in the way that they want to inhabit it. You can put the chair in the sun or in the shade, or organize chairs to form to support a conversation. Wayfinding is a critical factor. How do you know how to get to all the great things downtown Santa Monica? Good wayfinding is critical. And also world-class bicycle infrastructure. Santa Monica is, I think, one of the most beautiful cities on the West Coast. Obviously, it's got a lot of great things going for it. It deserves world-class cycling infrastructure. And also public art. Public art isn't just the major sculptural pieces. It can also be smaller, more temporary events and activities that activate the public realm, activate public space. And then, of course, culture and activation, inviting all the creativity in Santa Monica to actually activate the public realm. And then also creating opportunities for an ecology of commerce from your small-scale vendor all the way to your larger-scale retail outlets. These are all critical things for making great cities, great public space. And we've incorporated the data and all these factors to do things like master planning projects in Sweden, wonderful community in Sweden, doing some of the first shared public ways in England, the Brighton New Road project. This is before, this is after. 600% more people spending time in this place after the renovation was completed. And a project in Philadelphia, so thinking about how to introduce some creative thinking into public spaces with things like the Philadelphia porch swings. Also a data-driven project, learning from small-scale moves, learning from mistakes, learning from what works well, to create invitations for young and old to spend time together in public space. Well, I've been to Santa Monica a handful of times. I'm new here. I'm a visitor. I think I'm intended to bring the sort of outside perspective and some of our experience from around the world. But I've got a few hunches about what could make Santa Monica an even better place for people. It's already a very people-friendly city. I think that's obvious. But how could it be even better? I've got a couple hunches. What about introducing more opportunities for a very small-scale, fine-grained mixture of culture, commerce, and recreation? So Santa Monica is doing great with the bigger retail outlets and even some of the smaller ones. What about integrating things like music, small-scale vendors, and things like public art? So combining a mashup of these three things to make some really dynamic and interesting spaces. Or how is Santa Monica doing in terms of socioeconomic diversity in public space? What are the types of programs and events and activities that will invite people from different backgrounds to spend time together and socialize and meet one another? What are the Santa Monica specific kind of events that'll do that? And then thirdly, I think it's a great opportunity to invite Santa Monica's creative spirit to activate the public realm, to shape public space, like the Sunday Streets event a couple days ago. An example from San Francisco, here's our Market Street, it's our main thoroughfare. The planning department's been working on it for years. They finally decided they need to get some more input from the kind of creative talent in San Francisco. The city partnered with a foundation, gave out a number of small grants, 50 small grants actually, and this was the result. In 3 years of planning meetings for Market Street, we had about 900 participants come to the meeting, which is good. The Market Street Prototyping Festival, we had 300,000 people come out and share their creativity, share their ideas, and not just talking about them, but actually demonstrating the capacity for public life in our city streets. Really changing the mindset of how people think about and engage the public realm. So, I think for a lot of people, this is the image of Santa Monica, right? The pier, the wheel, the kind of beach, the waterfront. What are some ways that working together we can make Santa Monica a really great and an even better city for people? Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. We'd like to now open the floor if anyone has any questions for John.
Hi. You mentioned that great cities have families, two-parent families. Do you have any statistics on the percentages of families in great cities? Like, is it 50% of a city is families and 50% single, or is there a variation in any way?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what is the right percentage of families in cities. Although I do know we like to talk about creating an 18-hour or 24-hour city, right? Cities that stack functions, that create invitations for business, for commerce, for families, for play. In order to do that, it's about making mixed use neighborhoods, complete neighborhoods. And I think that's where downtown is headed, getting more residents, getting more family housing, right? That's going to result in an 18-hour or 24-hour city.
Family housing.
Family housing, crucial. Yeah, absolutely.
Did I see it?
I really liked what you had to say. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the mic. Oh, I'm sorry. I really enjoyed what you had to say. I really agree with a lot of the points you brought up about what makes a downtown a livable place, a viable, vibrant place. But my question is, as somebody who's lived in Santa Monica my entire life and seeing it transform, we often have people like yourself, experts, come and to give us their point of view on design, and it doesn't seem to translate very well into what actually gets, what actually happens in the end. So my question to you is, as the person who's here now presenting this to us, how do you see yourself implementing these ideas? Because they seem to get lost by the time these projects start.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. The question was, how do you implement some? There's a lot of great ideas out there, right? There's been a lot of plans. How do you actually make stuff happen? How do you kind of take those first steps to make stuff happen? You know, I think we live in a culture where there's a necessity actually to think long term and do the strategic plans, and we're pretty good at doing that. And I think also now more and more cities are getting used to the idea of getting experimental and actually taking on some risk, and it being okay with occasionally failing with something. In order to do that, I think it's about introducing a culture of experimentation into how we think about the city. You know, many other design processes, engineering processes use iteration to make things better. So trying something, learning from it, and then adding to it. So I think that's in my experience, you know, both the strategic planning is really important, but actually also taking that first step is really crucial. We've shown it in New York City. You know, that the transformation of Times Square wasn't a 10-year planning process. It was overnight, but it was built upon the city's 2030 sustainability plan, which said we need to get more people walking, biking, and taking transit in order to reduce our city's carbon footprint. That was the impetus, actually, to make those short-term changes. So some combination of doing that long-term planning, but also being willing to take the risk and take that first step. I think that's really crucial.
I see.
John, I just have to kind of ask you this question. We have a problem here in Santa Monica with benches, and a really bad plan that I think most of the public's really not very happy with. And it appears from your photographs that you've shown us from your work all over the world that benches are valuable. And I just wanted you to give feedback to us and to the people who are listening who work for the city of Santa Monica and the Big Blue Bus, so that they hear it from a specialist like you who seems valuable in what you're doing around the world, that the benches are valuable. And we need to hear that.
So wait a second, I don't understand. Do you love benches, or you don't like benches?
No. I think the public loves benches. The public of Santa Monica, the residents, love benches.
Okay.
But some people who are employed here somehow decided we don't want benches, and they took them away and they sold them. Yeah. And we think it's really sad. And I just wanted your feedback about that.
Yeah. Okay. It's a good question. And you know, we did the same thing in San Francisco 20 years ago. We had these beautiful granite benches that were put after the BART renovation there, our mass transit system. Big, beautiful benches. There was a lot of people spending time, a lot of people lingering. Downtown San Francisco also went through kind of an economic decline, so there was a lot of loitering activity. As a response, the city tore out all the benches, so now there's nowhere to sit. Now we're struggling to actually create invitations for people to stay. We don't just want people to pass through our public spaces or our streets. Streets are places that are really important in terms of contributing to the public realm, and in order to get people to stay and linger, you need places for people to sit. So benches are important, but we like to think about it as seating. You know, it's not just benches, it's movable chairs, it's movable furniture, so you can dial up and dial down the kind of activity that you think is important. So absolutely, good seating, or what we like to call social furniture, is actually a critical component of getting people to spend time in cities. Thanks for the comment.
Uh, One thing, I recently experienced something that has turned out to be absolutely wonderful in my life. I'm an age where empty nest happens, and I'm lucky enough that I had a young friend, slightly younger than my daughter, who moved in to rent her bedroom before the bed was even cold. And I was thinking how wonderful that's been for my life. I've been around my roommate and her friends, and she's been around my friends, and it's just been wonderful socially. And I was wondering whether or not there are programs to explicitly matchmake people whose nests are becoming empty with young people who would love to live walking distance from downtown.
Well, I think that's a great idea, and world's great cities, great public spaces have young people, old people. That's why we observe age and gender in public space to see how well spaces are doing relative to invitations for older and young people. So it's a great idea. Love that idea.
Back to the benches. Oh, back to the benches. One problem in Santa Monica is the homeless. They move in on all the beautiful benches. You know, a new bench like the park over here, they take over. You know, they have a nice time. They spread out during the day, make it their home.
Yeah.
So then that's difficult for
That's a big
everybody
challenge
else.
for all U.S. cities, and particularly my city, San Francisco. We have a huge homelessness challenge, and you know, our approach is that basically is dilution, not exclusion. So the idea is that yes, you've got homeless people need somewhere to sit too. But if any one user dominates a space, whether it's homeless people or skaters or old people or young people, they're going to exclude others. So our approach is create more invitations, and that has to do with programming, with good design, more invitations for more types of people to use public space. And so that's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge, but I think the way to approach it is not by pushing out or excluding, but actually inviting more life, more activity, more residents, more eyes on the street to make a balance so that you've got all sorts of different users in a public space, which make it comfortable for everyone. It's a serious challenge. Yeah.
I really appreciated your presentation, specifically the portions. Hey, hi. I guess I could stand up.
The voice.
I'm glad. Sorry. I really appreciate the presentation, specifically the portion where you talked a little bit about tactical urbanism. It's and tactical techniques for creating public opportunities to engage and experiment with cities. And I think that's really important to have a creative city where you can get public feedback. The city's done that recently with a proposal for the Michigan Avenue Neighborhood Greenway in our city, but I haven't seen so much done downtown. If you were thinking about ways to play with a downtown, are there any other, I know you showed some great examples, any other really interesting case studies that you'd be willing to share?
I really think that the urban prototyping festival is a great model. You know, small grants, right, given out to a number of players. According to this board over here, 43% of people in Santa Monica are engaged in some kind of creative industry. Okay. And wouldn't it be great if some of that creativity, if we could see it in downtown, in the streets, in the sidewalks? And I think one framework for doing that is something like a prototyping festival where, you know, it's a weekend event, but you just really invite that creativity out into the street, but also have a framework for that to inform longer-term planning and thinking. I think the tactics are most useful when they're connected to some larger strategic objectives, but you can't be afraid to take that first step and actually think about distributing, opening it up to the creative minds that are here is a great approach, and the Urban Prototyping Festivals is a great model for doing that. We started in San Francisco, now it's other cities are picking it up as well, and I think it'd be a great thing for Santa Monica's downtown.
Yes, I noticed that as more development come in, which has happened in the past if you research history concerning black people. That when we came up here mostly from the south, when the freeway came, people actually owned property and homes, but it took their properties home, so that left them in another situation where they could not live in Santa Monica. And so I noticed, I'm 71 years old now, and I have two grandsons who graduated college last year. They work in Santa Monica, but they cannot afford to live in Santa Monica. And when you're speaking of diversity, I'm asking the question, does that include black people? Because as you go around, and even in the neighborhood that I live in, even the seniors who have been in places 20 and 30 years, they can't find a place to live in Santa Monica anymore. Usually they have to go and, sleep on the sofa somewhere with their maybe their children, if their children have a place to live. So when people are planning, are they planning all black people out of the city of Santa Monica? I want people and the persons who are in charge of designing to think that we were here, we have built Santa Monica, but now we're only like a small percentage, and there has to be a reason for that.
Yeah. Thanks for the comment. It's a really important issue, and I think a lot of cities are facing this, rising prices, rising costs, and that's one of the reasons why we study and evaluate social diversity in public space. How are cities doing relative to inviting all residents to participate? And that, unfortunately, is not something that you can solve with a tactical move. That requires a really strong housing policy to make inclusionary housing for people of all different backgrounds. And certainly, I don't think anybody in Santa Monica is thinking about excluding black people. Certainly, I mean, it's a critical part of the social fabric of the city. And you belong, and it's really crucial that that's integrated into the city's housing policy. Thanks for the comment.
Hi, I just had a quick question about, unfortunately I came into your presentation a little bit late, so you might have already gone over this, but given how small our downtown is relatively to other downtowns, I was wondering if there were any specific spaces that you saw for implementing this kind of public space ideas.
It's a great question, and I'm just getting to know the downtown, so I don't know it as well as you all. But it seems like the areas that have the wider sidewalks have a great opportunity for experimentation. We have on Market Street, San Francisco, we've got 25-foot wide sidewalks. Part of that is called the furnishing zone. We're starting to rethink that as the street life zone. How much life, how much creativity can that space support? So in addition to the new kind of open spaces that you're trying to create downtown, think about the streets and sidewalks and the incredible opportunity that they represent to invite kind of creativity in public life. Sure.
We have time for 3 more questions.
Hi. Hi. Thanks a lot for the presentation. It's really interesting. Learned a lot. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Is that better? Thanks. So one of the cool things you focused on was on human scale and in public spaces. So what I was wondering, is there like a certain minimum amount of density you need such that there's enough people that they'll actually go into the square? So for example, if you go into suburban areas, everyone's driving their car and their public spaces aren't there because there's just not enough people there. So do you have any research on like how many people you need till that becomes a vibrant area? Thanks.
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to it. What is the density threshold to activate public space? But I will say that I think the tendency has been to think about open spaces as only these kind of big signature open spaces, and maybe not pay as much attention to the smaller scale, finer grain neighborhood serving spaces that are also critically important. And in our view, quality is more important than quantity. And again, using an iterative approach, you can flex and expand and grow as the city gets more dense, as it gets more people. But I don't actually know if there's a number in terms of a threshold. But that's one thing that a public life study can help you do, is understand, well, how many people are walking on our sidewalks now? How many people are using public space? How is the growth of the city and the use of public spaces responding to the increase in density or the increase in more people walking, more people biking? So monitoring progress is really important to make intelligent decisions. But thanks for the question.
I want to note that there's probably more questions here than we have time for, but John will be here if you'd like to speak with him individually as we move through the program as well. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Carl. My family have only been here since about 1890. We've developed some things over that time, and I've been privileged to have gone through various cities in this country, some of them that are held up, like Denver, Portland, Sacramento, Minneapolis, and seeing some of the center development that has come about with concentrated mass transit, A. B, I've had the opportunity of visiting cities in Europe through various modes of transportation, and you can see cities there that are, some people can't deal with it, but are 5 and 6 story high, that are over 500 years old, the development, and more, and older than that. And they seem to work. And I'm referring to some of them which you have seen pictures of that are in Italy. Siena, San Gimignano, and you know, we can go on and on and on. And what I'm concerned about is that people have various services that they want to be paid for. Now, where do you think that money's going to come from? In the past, it's come from the business community, whether it be the retail or what have you. Anyway, that's it. I'm at the end of my thing, and I'm not politically correct. I could go on and on and on. So, anyway.
Well, I think it's a great point. You know, there are a lot of very dense cities that are lower scale. Yeah. But I really like your point about transit connectivity. You know, if our cities are going to thrive, continue to thrive, it's absolutely important that we shift our culture and shift our mindset into one where we really prioritize people walking, biking, and taking transit. Santa Monica is doing great in that regard now. We've made some great steps, but I think we can do even better, and we have to. You know, for the reasons I mentioned, but also not to mention our sustainability of our cities, our resilience is critical that we make that shift to more compact, transit-friendly cities. So thanks for the comment, and thank you for having me.
And our last question here.
Our last question, okay. Cool.
I just want to thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it. And I wonder, are you familiar with Palisade Park that we have here in Santa Monica? It's the park that overlooks the ocean.
Yes.
It's on Ocean Avenue.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say it's one of those places that we are blessed to have because everyone walks their dogs, they push their kids, they walk their kids, and it's a community place. And people know each other, they get to know each other. And I think it's a real blessing because I do my running there late in the afternoon every day. And I mean, I feel so blessed to have that park. Where I can run without shoes on. I run barefoot in the grass, and I see so many people every day with their babies, with their dogs. And so, are there other cities that have places like that?
Not even close. You guys are so lucky here. Are you kidding? That's amazing. That sounds like such a great space. I'm going to go check it out tomorrow. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I'd like to introduce now Peter James, who's going to be giving a presentation on the Downtown Community Plan.
Hi, everybody. Whoa. Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? I'm well, thanks. They always say it, but tough act to follow. City manager and an urbanist. John, do you have the clicker? So what I'm going to try to do tonight is frame all of this discussion about public life and public spaces within the context of the Downtown Community Plan. As many of you may be aware, because I recognize a lot of faces here, but many more may not, because I see a lot of new faces here. The city's been working on a plan for the downtown for the past 5 years. That's really come about because our downtown has changed. It's a much, much different place than it was 5, 10, definitely different than it was 20 years ago. Downtown serves our entire community, all of our neighborhoods, in about 229 acres. It's the size of the Santa Monica Airport. You can walk from end to end, 5 to 10 minutes. You can get real local downtown. And recently, downtown has emerged as one of our newest neighborhoods. We now have a downtown neighborhood association. Welcome. Now let me ask you guys, how many people go downtown once a week? Wow. How many people go downtown more than once a week? This is incredible. Well, a survey that Downtown Santa Monica Inc. did about 3 years ago showed that 94% of our community, all 90,000 of us, go downtown once a year. Well, we're updating those numbers in this meeting right now. 72% go monthly, and then I think a percentage, about 35 or 40, go weekly. So you guys are really part of the new downtown reality. We use our downtown, and as the city manager said, it makes a difference when we care for our downtown. When visitors come here and they see that we appreciate and take care of our downtown and our downtown residents, it really rings with the authenticity of a local downtown. So just a little bit of information about what's happening there. As I mentioned, it's about 229 acres. Since the 1990s, there's been a growing population of residents. There's about 4,500 men and women and children living in the downtown in about 2,700 units. By and large, downtown developed as a commercial district until the Northridge earthquake in 1994, when a bunch of buildings were knocked down, and city policy began to incentivize the production of housing. So from that moment forward, we started to build and grow and evolve. To today, we have about 4,500. The downtown plan, which looks out 15, 20 years from now, anticipates that an additional 3,200 people will be living in the downtown, so about 8,000 or 9,000 folks. So we have some work to do here, right? Because downtown was developed as a commercial district. It didn't grow up with parks. It didn't grow up with little bodegas. It didn't grow up with a lot of the things that we have in our neighborhoods. And these people are just like us, by and large. Downtown also has to contend with 20,000 employees that come here every day for work and 7 million visitors a year. So downtown is operating at the local scale, at the regional scale, and at the international scale. There's a lot of pressure put on these small 229 acres. So how are people doing down there? We've been looking at the well-being dimensions to evaluate and understand some of the issues that is facing the social level of downtown. And in many categories, downtown's doing great. People are outside more often than anywhere else. They've got access to stores and restaurants and bars, nightlife, 2 farmers markets a week. So they're eating on average about 5 more pieces of fruit than your average Santa Monican. That's cool. And then the transit use is really through the roof, transit and walking. We have 4 million alightings and disembarkings a year in the downtown, 4 million. Really a tremendous number. But there are areas where downtown needs some work. People in the downtown, much like many of us in this room, are stressed out about paying the rent, keeping their job, working too much, not spending a lot of time with their family. But the most disconcerting dimension here is that in the downtown, people don't feel connected to their neighbors. They don't have that same thing where everybody knows your name. So this is an element that we really are focusing on in our planning work to nurture that growing downtown community. So people first, that's what we say. And we ask ourselves, what can we do to support our downtown, both as a larger community and for the downtown community that's growing there? And for tonight, we've really broken it into a couple of different dimensions. We're going to talk about the pedestrian realm, because that's where people meet at the sidewalk level, at the ground floor. We're going to talk about our public spaces, how we can get more of those in the downtown, and then also what do we put into the downtown to make those places stick, the cultural activities, the art, the events, that type of programming. And we really could use your help here. All the stuff that John talked about, that Rick talked about, how do we get it was the question. When do we get it? Who pays for it? The downtown plan will answer all of those questions for our decision makers as these issues come before them. So starting with the pedestrian realm, this map shows that we have some of the highest pedestrian volumes in the entire city. Each one of these blue dots represents about anywhere between 2,500 and 4,500 people at an intersection per hour. That's more people walking downtown than are in cars downtown. So there's a really, really high demand for pedestrian comfort, pedestrian amenities, and great streets in our downtown. We're seeing this phenomenon happen all over our city. We've invested a lot of time and resources in building out new streetscapes, Ocean Park Boulevard, the medians on Ocean. We're looking at streetscapes on Lincoln, the Colorado Esplanade. People are walking more in downtown. Now, our last numbers were recorded in 2013 that showed an increase between 2011 and 2013. That 20% represents an additional 800 people at each one of those intersections every single hour of the day in the downtown. And by and large, that's consistent with the way that we are as a community. We walk. We walk places in our neighborhood, to our jobs, to schools. That's just who we are as a community. And we do have some great streets in downtown. 3rd Street Promenade is obviously one that we've put a lot of time and energy into. We reimagined it in the 90s. This is very familiar to all of us right now. But we have some other great streets. Santa Monica Boulevard, 18-foot wide sidewalks. Broadway, 18-foot wide sidewalks. These are areas where the bus runs its service and drops hordes and hordes of people off. And as you can see here, there's enough space for 3, 4, 5 people to walk abreast. But that's not the case everywhere. There's areas where we know we can do better. This is on 2nd Street in front of Buca de Beppo. This is your average 12-foot sidewalk. The outdoor dining barricade comes out, butts right across from the tree pit, leaving only 3 feet, which is not even enough for 2 people to walk side by side. So the question is, how do we resolve this without creeping into the vehicular right of way? How do we deal with this? And one of the strategies of the downtown plan is to literally push buildings back from the property line when they redevelop. Obviously, we're not going to push a real building, but when they come up for a new project, we're going to ask them to step back. And it looks like this. This is a little model we put together in the past couple days of Lincoln Boulevard, which has 8-foot sidewalks. And this is a real-life example, by the way. When the Denny's project came forward, we had them push back. We asked them for 12. I think we got even more. So you're going to have 20 feet of sidewalk space on Lincoln Boulevard. And why is that important? Well, it's important because we need to put our greatest pedestrian facilities in areas where people are going to use them, where the demand is. And so we've come up with a matrix here where we look at the various widths that we need to accommodate in the downtown. These are our average workhorse streets, or north-souths, a couple of east-wests, more in the interior of the downtown. On those transit malls, we're going to keep with 18 feet and extend those sidewalks 18 feet all the way up to Lincoln. On Lincoln Boulevard and down Colorado and along Ocean Avenue, where we anticipate lots of people walking, lots of people that are moving into those new projects on Lincoln, walking to the train, walking to the ocean. We're looking for 20 feet in those areas. And then the Esplanade, 25 feet, parts of Wilshire, we'll talk about that in a second. And then, of course, the Promenade, leave it as it is. So here's a couple of simulations of what this might look like. If we look at Lincoln Boulevard and sort of pick out this site here at Vaughn's, Vaughn's is not going anywhere. There's no project in application there. But should it redevelop, maybe we ask them to move back that 12 feet. And it gives us the opportunity to bring the building up to their setback line, but to provide us with that elbow room along the street so that those residents of Lincoln Boulevard have a very direct path down to the train on Colorado. And it gives us a chance to really change Lincoln Boulevard, which I think it'd be tough to argue is in dire need of change. Wilshire Boulevard. Now, John brought up Market Street in San Francisco and the notion of the sidewalk furnishing zone. On Wilshire Boulevard, from 4th Street down to Ocean Avenue, a lot of the vehicular traffic has slowed down. By the time people get down Wilshire Boulevard. They've made their turns to Mid-City or into Wilmot. By the time they get here, there's not nearly the density of traffic that there is in other parts of Wilshire. There's also an area where the promenade terminates and has a great view of the Pacific Ocean. So one of the concepts that we carry forward in the downtown plan is this idea that we could affect a really esplanade-like treatment here on Wilshire Boulevard. 4th Street overpass is another place for a signature sidewalk, as we call them. The expo station's right there now. We've got high school students, people parking. It's a really treacherous journey to get over this thing. So we have a short-term strategy to bring lighting and landscaping, public art, improve that railing. It doesn't quite feel like it's sufficient. And then, of course, the long-term strategy is to look at ways to cap the freeway so that that becomes less of a bridge and more of public space. Ocean Avenue is our 4th and final signature sidewalk. This is an area where we have already very wide sidewalks. We have that splendid vista that's afforded by Palisades Park, and yet it feels a little bit dull, if I may say just my own personal opinion. And the city's just invested a lot of time and resources creating the Esplanade, which terminates at Ocean Avenue. So the plan anticipates sometime in the future, with more guidance from the community, the ability to transition parts of Ocean Avenue into more multimodal streetscapes with additional sidewalk space that will allow that dining to come right out to the edge and create a little bit more symmetry than we currently have. And if these all sound like they're piecemeal, do not worry. We intend to coordinate everything so that it has a cohesive aesthetic and that the entire system functions as a network. Now, public spaces. Here's a statistic that you could take it either way, positive or negative. About 50% of Santa Monicans spend time in city's public spaces, and this is also true for downtown residents. Now, you could ask yourself, well, that's, is that a bad number? Maybe, or you can ask yourself, do people consider parks the only kind of open space, or are they thinking about streets? We really don't know exactly what people are thinking in this respect, but 50% is not a huge number, and we have some really terrific public spaces in our city. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot in our downtown. Now, I mentioned that downtown was developed as a commercial district and therefore doesn't benefit from any planned parks, but it does have a lot of parks around it. Reed Park, Palisades Park, Tongva Park, and Ken Gensler Square, and of course the pier. But in the interior, the public space that we consider, I think, as a community to be what downtown offers is the promenade, the recently opened Esplanade and the Expo Station, and then a true public space at the courtyard at the public library. But what are the opportunities for more public spaces inside downtown? Now, these locations have been developed by looking at areas where people have demonstrated some type of development interest. So we know that people have either an application in or they're interested in redeveloping their property. We'd like to get some open space out of that. Other properties are areas where it may happen, it may not. In fact, all of this may happen or may not, but they're of sufficient size where they could host significant public open space for our community. And in that fashion, if we just drew a 1/8 mile circle around each one of these, which is a 2.5 minute walk, we began to paint a very different picture of the downtown, both for the community at large and for the residents that live there. The ability to walk to a public open space, whether you're a resident, an employee, or a visitor, within 2.5 minutes. And that's important for downtown. Sometimes you just need to get out of your bound environment. You just need to relax, check out. So this is something we're very interested in taking forward, and we need your help determining what exactly is the right size, the right color, the right texture, all of that stuff for Santa Monica. Is it something like this, a series of pocket parks? Okay. Is it something like this, a town square or a plaza? This is Pioneer Courthouse Square in Portland. This is infinitely programmable. They host lots of festivals, events. It's tied directly to the train. it looks very simple in its orchestration, but a lot of stuff happens here, and it's beloved by the community. Or is it a series of things like courtyards, more intimate spaces, tucked away from the street? Or is it a park? This is Jameson Park in Portland, Oregon. It's a combination of hardscape and softscape. It's not enormous, but it really serves, you can see those 4, 5, 6-story buildings in the background there. It really serves those residents that are populating that portion of Portland. And let's not forget that over 15, 20 years, as those 3,200 new people come to the downtown, as the 4,500 people that are already there begin to start their families, have children, that we need to think of the little guys as well. Or getting back to more tactical stuff, can we begin to look at our right-of-way as places for additional public space? And can we ask our buildings to provide additional public space in the forms of paseos that connect one public space to the other? We need your input on all of this stuff. Now, we do have one secret weapon up our sleeves, something that's already in the bag, and these are our privately owned public spaces. We call them POPs. Now, these are buildings that were largely developed in the 70s and the 80s, the kind, the typical corporate center with the hard plaza in the front. Nothing happens there. Maybe a couple guys are smoking. We've got 5 or 6 of them in the downtown. They're all of significant size. They're all very empty. Here's one at Ocean in Arizona. This one's very familiar to anybody that has walked to the end of the promenade. Huge space filled with trees, but not very inviting. I think if you were to throw a blanket down and have a picnic there, you'd be asked to leave. This is on 6th and Wilshire. This is the SGI Center. These are all publicly accessible. They've all written covenants with the city. But there's no place to sit down. There's no activity happening at the ground floor. And by and large, for every single one of these, it's because they were developed at a time when the heights were greater, the densities were greater, and they're all over what we would allow today. So they're all kind of paralyzed in a way. So what if we allowed small changes to happen? Gave them a pass, a tiny little pass, add a small cafe, host a craft fair, have a farmer's market in your plaza. These things are prohibited by our current zoning. But with the downtown plan, we have the ability to change that, to turn the dial up or down so that we can bring some street life to these places. And when we begin to plug in the POPs to our new public spaces, then we're doing much better than 2.5 minutes overall. Now, John brought up the notion of social furniture, and this is social furniture on steroids. These are called meeting bowls. It was another experiment that happened in Times Square. This may be fun for a couple of months, but I just wanted to point out we actually have quite a bit of this in Santa Monica. These are pictures that we took today. This is at the mall. This is in the mall's courtyard. We've got those chairs on the promenade. We have benches. I see people all the time sitting, having conversations. So we're actually quite plugged into the notion of social furniture, but of course the question is, can we take it even further? We know that people need water. These days they need batteries. We've begun to see these things pop up on the promenade and other places. Games, things that invite people to stop what they're doing and just play a game. 10 years ago, I was in Melbourne, Australia, and I saw this guy playing, he had a pink mohawk at the time, and he was playing a stiff businessman with a briefcase playing chess. And I came across this photo yesterday. Somebody else took it. It's more recent. That's what this guy does, and he does it well. And people come in and out, and it's very simple. It's just big chess on a street corner. And with the expo and more people coming into the downtown, in addition to fresh water, fresh batteries, we all need to freshen up. So this is something we can look forward to in the future. I'm almost done. There's two parts of 3 parts. The last part is about the glue that brings it all together, the ways that we connect with each other, the things that we do together, the places we go. And in downtown, we have a lot of things to do. And because of who we are as a community, we spend time outdoors almost every single day. We know that we walk a lot. We know now that we bike a lot. So it should be something that we can celebrate in our public space strategy, we also know that we're very creative. Over 40% of us make our living in the arts. So is there a way to marry that somehow? There probably is. What's right for us, though? When it comes to cultural facilities, museums, other destinations like that, we've heard a lot of people interested in a children's museum. Some folks are advocating for more of a MoCA-like experience, or possibly something like the Hammer with revolving exhibits, hosted events. You tell us what's right for the downtown. If we can find the space, we can have it all, sure. And then public art. I think there's been a lot of discussion about, bringing that sort of love for creativity, marrying it to the density of pedestrians in the downtown, and celebrating the creativity of Santa Monica. Now we have a huge public art collection. A lot of it's very visible, like the cradle on top of the Santa Monica place. Some of it's hidden. You'll see these in the parking garages. Not a very good photo, but there's a lot of public art in our parking garages. To the very famous in Whimsical, the dinosaurs on the 3rd Street Promenade. One of the key aspects of the downtown plan is identifying what do we do with our cultural money that we get from development. Do we spend it on something like this, which is iconic and draws people from all over the world, but costs $23 million? It's this Cloud Gate in Millennium Park. It's in Chicago? No, it's not. It's made out of 168 stainless steel panels that were highly polished, and it's sensational. I mean, there's probably, if anybody's been to Chicago, they've likely stood in front of this if it's been within the past 10 years. But there's more modest investments that we can make. This is in Vancouver. A lot of photos like this are taken with these statues, and they just make people feel good, or something on the grander scale. Cupid Span in San Francisco. Small, medium, or large, what's our preference? Or does it even need to be permanent? Can it be temporary, like Candy Chang's exhibits that bring out sort of secret confessions in the community? Or can it just be functional? Can it be the utilitarian stuff that we have in our streets and on our sidewalks that can serve to create that vibrancy, jazz hands, at the pedestrian realm? This is a very interesting exhibit in Jerusalem. This is a POPs. This is what a POPs looks like in Jerusalem. Void of life, very empty, barren. And what this design team did was create these flowers that sensed human movement. So they're wilted when nobody's around, but the second you approach, they puff up with air. So it literally breathes life into these spaces. Now, in addition to public art and cultural facilities and all the stuff that we have going on, we also do a lot for our community. We've got farmers markets downtown. The Glow is partly in downtown. DTSM runs a lot of programs, Winterlit, Pharaoh's Festival, movie night, picnic on the promenade, and of course ICE. These are things that we do with our families, with our friends. It makes us feel good. It's free, which is one of the greatest aspects of downtown. But what else can we do? We've got a really thriving culinary scene going on in downtown. I think we have 2 of America's top 100 chefs resident here. We've got several Michelin restaurants. Would a food festival be something that's appropriate for downtown? 43% of us make our living in the arts. Can we get more directly involved in having art festivals that are truly local? We have excellent weather year-round. Philadelphia has excellent weather for about 4 months. They do this every weekend. Is it something that we could do? Every weekend, once a month, once every couple months, just set up shop and party in the garden. And of course, the entertainment options don't stop there. We've got concerts, both on the pier, on the promenade. We've got, the street performers that we all love. Couple of nightclubs, I think 2 in the downtown. But what else would round it out? A lot of our regulations prohibit live music in the downtown because of noise. So it's difficult to open up say, a nightclub or a concert venue. But would something like this be appropriate, or taken to another level, something like this? What about live theater? Or even just a nightclub where we can go out, if we can get a babysitter, and hang out, or all of it. So, getting back to well-being, all of these dimensions are important for all of us as a Santa Monica community, as a downtown community, and it really is a people-first attitude that the downtown community plan takes. And so we would really value your input in helping us fine-tune the approach to pedestrian realm, public spaces, and then the cultural activities that will help us thrive. That's the end of my portion. The plan was to go to the boards where you guys can talk directly to staff, but if anybody has a burning question, I suppose I could take one or two. Yes, ma'am.
Getting people out of their cars, I'm all for that. One of my favorite ideas is having, I know there's going to be a bike path that goes maybe on 17th Street or something that's proposed, but for me to start as a base,
Repeat.
to me, the bike path. So
17th Street.
protected, like not with the cars, because I feel like if you want to get people out of their cars, like I'm an avid bike rider and I want to get people on their bikes too, but I get on my bike and then I'm bombarded with the car exhaust. So then I think, God, if they just had a separate, and I think they're going to do one on 17th Street, maybe. But
We
I
are
would like
looking
one,
at
back
that.
to my proposal, 4th Street, 7th Street, separate from the cars. That would be I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the bicycle infrastructure has really been something that has dramatically improved over the past 5 years. We've added, I think, 105 miles of bike lanes in the city, 23 in the past year alone. And we have one separated bicycle facility on the Esplanade. We are looking at 17th Street to be either a two-way cycle track or a buffered bike lane, and more will come. Oh, Elena.
Hi, Peter. So as a downtown resident, and something that recently happened to one of my neighbors, they actually were jumped in one of the alleyways, actually 2 weeks ago. And so in kind of the questions really for the two, which is how do we really, I feel that our alleys and our alleyways in the downtown are not activated. There's not enough, not just eyes on the street, but from a artistic perspective. And it's like, and there's, for me, who's an urbanite and who's lived in urban centers, I think there's so much more we could do in terms of public murals, in terms of beautifying the alleyways. I think that's the way we walk home, and that's the way I walk. But just how we can do that. And actually, my neighbor who was, hurt from all this is actually a question from him. So that's how positive we are, and we would like to see some changes. So just some questions for the two of you. Thank you.
And I assume your friend has spoken with the police, right? Okay, great. So on the alleys in the downtown, there's been the notion of art alleys for the longest time. The challenge has been maintaining them as their service function as well, because in the downtown, the apartment buildings have their trash in the back. So that is something we're working through with Public Works. We think we can get additional space by undergrounding. There's still overhead power lines in many of the alleys. When we are able to do that, I think we can turn our attention to making them more street-like. And I can't remember, John, if you had a slide in your presentation about the transformation of alleys.
Melbourne maybe 20 years ago started really rethinking their alleys to become laneways, which are super vibrant, very nicely scaled public spaces that have public art, pedestrian lighting, those sorts of things. I think you can start with that, and I think it's a great opportunity as underground the utilities to really make them a really nice part of the public realm, make them a lot safer and vibrant.
Thank you. I think. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get to you, Jody.
First, I would like to make a comment on what the gentleman there said about tall buildings that are in the photographs. Most of those buildings that are in European capitals and even in New York are built around squares. You don't just have a lot of tall buildings. They're usually built around squares. And I think one of the problems in Santa Monica is that they are so interested in developing that they're forgetting that we do need that open space. And one particular area is 4th Street in Arizona,
4th in Arizona,
and 5th, which belongs, I believe, to the city of
That's
Santa
correct.
Monica. And what is the response to that question? Why should the city use that as a source of revenue, so to speak, from a private developer? It's one of the few downtown parcels that is actually belonging to the citizens of Santa Monica. And one other remark I had, when it terms about the safety issue, I think when they do have development, instead of only requiring a couple of affordable apartments, they might consider hiring some policemen as part of their agreement with the city, that they have to hire some more law enforcement, and maybe even have policemen on foot like they do in New York City.
Thank you. So I think I can quickly address that. The question was about what's going on at 4th in Arizona, what type of public spaces is being contemplated there, and a very large public plaza is part of the project, as well as the retention of the seasonal ice rink. With respect to policing, DTSM runs a tremendous ambassador program. It's not supplemental to the police force, but it's more of an ambassador program where folks are directed to key destinations, to bathrooms. There is a vigilance on the street in that respect, and if there are any future concerns about crime on the streets or people not feeling comfortable, we can direct those comments to the police department. Jody Summers.
Hi, Peter.
Hey.
If we took steps, or if we continued on our quest to reactivate the Civic, that would, first of all, unite the downtown, which is now separated by a freeway and a train. Where are we on that path?
Well, the Civic Center has... See Rick making a move. I wonder if he's coming. No, he's not. Yeah. Rick, do you want to answer this question? Did you hear it? Jody's question is about what is happening with the Civic Center.
Oh, sure. The short answer is not much. The Civic Auditorium, which is one of the beloved landmarks and assets of the community, doesn't meet current earthquake standards, the part next to us. And so while we still allow people in the building, we don't allow 2,000 people to gather for a concert because of the very significant concern. We are in earthquake country. We all remember the 1994 earthquake, and we wouldn't want to see a tragedy. So we went through a very elaborate process as a community, a contentious process, to see where you could solve two problems. One is the maybe $50 million it would take to rebuild it as it is, which is more expensive than tearing it down and starting over again. But people really would love to see the building retained because it has such a sense of history. So it costs approximately $50 million to bring it up to earthquake standards. Where would that money come from? And the second is when the city operated it, for better, for worse, it was running about $1 million deficit a year. So the taxes that go for police and fire and other things were really going to support it. Now that's not unusual. Most cultural and cultural institutions run a deficit. An entertainment venue typically runs at a profit, right? That's why they call it entertainment. So the committee gave forth its report. There are a lot of answers, none of which seem to generate a tremendous amount of support. One answer, it would be a tax measure for us all to chip in and pay for the $50 million. Another would be to take the money from all the other projects that people care about in the community. A third would be to allow significant development on that site that would generate revenue. That was particularly unpopular. A fourth is to hope that someone with a very large checkbook would suddenly appear and write us a check in exchange for calling it the, oh, I don't know, Bill Gates Civic Auditorium. And all of those are possibilities, but none have seemed to generate a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. So the step authorized by the City Council unanimously earlier this year is to issue a request for essentially qualifications or ideas, not really a formal proposal, but see if there are anyone out there, a commercial entity, a nonprofit entity, a philanthropist, who would partner with the city. We do not want to let go of that. I don't think we want to give it to a commercial entity for 50 years and not have control. But is there anyone out there who might partner the community to both rehabilitate it, to contribute toward the rehabilitation, and to contribute toward what it would cost to keep it in operation as a community asset? So that's a long answer because it's a complicated problem. I certainly have been sensitized to how much people care about that asset, and I understand why. Peter talked about the value of cultural institutions, and when he asked, should we do this, or should we do this, or should we do that, someone said, can't we do all of it, right? And if the check is big enough, you can. And let me just close with this, and then we're going to move to your getting a chance, not just one person talking, but all of us getting a chance to get our input up on the board. We want to get all of your ideas and suggestions. Let me just close with a story, true story. After the Allies restored democratic government in Vienna, Austria, which of course had been annexed by Nazi Germany, the old social democrats who'd either been in concentration camps or in hiding or in the resistance, they came together to start the first city council in Vienna, this wonderful former capital of a great empire and of course a center of world culture and music. And the first action they took in this devastated city that had been bombed by the Allies and that people were hungry, there were no jobs, there was no money, they levied a 10-penny tax on each loaf of bread. What for? To rebuild the opera house. It was that important to Vienna, Austria, that the first thing they did was tax themselves to rebuild this wonderful symbol of who they were as a community. Tonight really is all about what are we as a community, what's our character. And so we want to give you the opportunity to give your thoughts, give your suggestions, and fundamentally what we're trying to do here is to come together as a community and develop a plan that we will stick to. If there's one source of mistrust in this community, and there are many, because it's America, and this is a particularly mistrustful time in our country's history, for good reasons and maybe some bad. But if there's one important source, it's let's stick to our plans. Let's make a great plan, and then let's stick to it. So that's what we're up to tonight. So have at it. We welcome your thoughts, your suggestions, and your ideas.